Welcome to the fifth and final part of our RFP Toolkit, where we will be looking at RFP distribution and vendor selection. In the previous module, we described how to use the online wizard from IC for creating an initial draft RFP document. So naturally, with your core team, you will now go at this, refine this document, and fill out the missing sections, in particular the functional requirements. Of course, here it's also really important that you apply internal standards if they exist, and that you do a thorough review with your key stakeholders, your business sponsors, management, procurement, legal, and so on, and then get final management approval for the RFP document. This will then typically be sent to the previously defined vendor target list, unless, of course, you're making a public announcement of the RFP. If you are working with a targeted list, then, of course, it's really important to contact suitable vendors to make sure that you really get the high quality offers that you want, and then eventually you issue the RFP. Now, as part of the RFP process and evaluation, there's one part which is really important, which is the Q&A process. So typically, no RFP document is bulletproof. There will be questions from the different vendors. In the interest of a transparent and fair process, it's really good practice to collect the different questions from the different vendors and then get back to everybody who has applied with the same document, which is basically a consolidated version of questions and answers that address any inconsistencies or smaller holes that you found in the RFP document. Once this is done, once you start receiving offers, there's some additional tasks that typically are done. First one is reference checks. If this is legally permissible, then this is a great way of checking and how far the data provided to you in the offer that you have received is really checking against the experience that other customers have made with the vendor and or its products. It's also really important that what you learn through these reference checks then basically is being fed back into the evaluation score matrix. The next thing beyond reference checks is POCs or pilots. They are a great way of really putting to test what the vendors are offering to you. Yeah, when naturally every vendor is trying to make his product look as nice and good as possible, and the pilot really is the litmus test where you have a chance before signing the contract to really find out if what the vendor is promising can be delivered. One key question here is, who is funding this? Is this part of the RFP process? Do you expect the top 3 vendors to basically do this for free? Or is this already part of the project execution phase where some funding actually from you goes into this? Again, that's something that should be clearly articulated in the early stages of the RFP process. Another key thing to look out for is the evaluation committee. So how do you actually set up the evaluation committee? Who do you include from a business and technology point of view, from procurement, from legal, etc.? How do you ensure that the people who are assigned to the evaluation committee have sufficient time available to support the intense process? And how do you structure, for example, the evaluation related meetings in terms of preparation, training for the evaluation committee, making sure that everybody is on the same page in terms of requirements and criteria and so on. So this all feeds into the evaluation process, where you typically first look at the functional and non-functional items, and then the cost scores, and basically feed all of this into your evaluation sheet to get first results. Result for your management typically is not only the score, but also a written recommendation that provides a short and succinct statement with your recommendation based on the evaluation. In terms of the evaluation itself, especially for the cost part, depending on the size of your organization and the size of the project, it can make sense to actually have the cost evaluation be run as a separate process, which is independent of the evaluation of the functional and non-functional criteria, potentially evaluated by different teams or at least different people, and then use your evaluation form to basically merge all of this back together to get one holistic view at the results. Last but not least, communicating the results. Sometimes you will have a standard internal procedure for communicating with the vendor. Typically, the vendors will appreciate direct feedback. For example, really making the final evaluation results available to them, or at least the part of the evaluation that you are prepared to share. That's nice to the vendors. It will help them improve their offerings and so on. It can help with the process from a long-term point of view, but it can also lead to unwanted discussions if vendors don't agree to particular aspects of the evaluation. So that's something that needs to be managed. And again, looking back at the discussion we had earlier on, one question, of course, is do you really have an evaluation for the solution as a whole, or do you have a staged approach where you evaluate and then basically select different blocks and pieces of the solution? So that obviously also has an impact on how you set up and run your evaluation process and how long you keep different vendors in the loop. So to summarize, we have been extensively looking at project planning and the different factors there that play a key role in terms of defining the scope, making a make versus buy decision, and so on. We've then looked at the RFP creation and the different aspects important there. We have just looked at RFP distribution and finally the vendor selection. And naturally, from there, basically, it's back to the project manager making sure that from day one after the vendor selection, his project continues to run as efficiently as possible with the new vendors or vendors on board. So with that, we hope that you enjoyed the RFP toolkit and that you can put it to good use. For any more questions you might have, please feel free to contact us directly. Looking forward to hearing from you. Thank you.